Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum.
सभी को मैत्रीपूर्ण जय भीम। आप सभी को मेरी और NNBY की तरफ से क्रांति ज्योति महात्मा ज्योतिबा फुले और भारत रत्न डॉक्टर बाबा साहब आम्बेडकर की जयंती की हार्दिक शुभकामनाएं। बाबा, नाम आपका इस तरह लिख चुके हैं अपने वजूद पर, बाबा नाम आपका इस तरह लिख चुके हैं अपने वजूद पर कि आपका नाम भी कोई ले तो सर सजदा करने झुक जाता है। मैं समीक्षा, NNBY की एक्टिविस्ट, आप सभी का फिर से एक बार स्वागत करती हूँ। आज हम इस वर्चुअल प्लेटफॉर्म पर क्रांति ज्योति महात्मा ज्योतिबा फुले और भारत रत्न डॉक्टर बाबा साहब आम्बेडकर, इन दो महापुरुषों की जयंती मनाने के लिए इकट्ठा हुए हैं। इन्हीं दो महापुरुषों की जयंती उत्सव को एक नए आयाम पर ले जाते हुए NNBY इन दो महापुरुषों के दार्शनिक विचारों का उत्सव ग्लोरी ऑफ आइडियोलॉजिकल थॉट्स मनाने जा रहा है। आर्को, द लिबरेटेड एनर्जी, इस थीम के अंतर्गत यह 3 दिवसीय कार्यक्रम आयोजित किया गया है। इसी के लिए हमारे साथ यहाँ ब्रह्मचारी लोकमित्र जी उपस्थित है। इस कार्यक्रम की शुरुआत हम पूजा के साथ करते हैं। पूजा के लिए मैं प्रणय और पायल को आमंत्रित करती हूँ।
सभी लोग एक साथ हाथ जोड़ेंगे। त्रिशरण पंचशील गाथा। नमो तस्स भगवतो अरहतो सम्मा सम्बुद्धस्स। नमो तस्स भगवतो अरहतो सम्मा सम्बुद्धस्स। नमो तस्स भगवतो अरहतो सम्मा सम्बुद्धस्स। बुद्धं शरणं गच्छामि, धम्मं शरणं गच्छामि, संघं शरणं गच्छामि, द्वितीयं बुद्धं शरणं गच्छामि, द्वितीयं धम्मं शरणं गच्छामि, द्वितीयं संघं शरणं गच्छामि, तृतीयं बुद्धं शरणं गच्छामि, तृतीयं धम्मं शरणं गच्छामि, तृतीयं संघं शरणं गच्छामि। पाणातिपाता वेरमणि सिक्खापदं समादियामि। अदेनदाना वेरमणि सिक्खापदं समादियामि। कामेषु मिथ्याचारः वेरमणि सिक्खापदं समादियामि। मुसावादा वेरमणि सिक्खापदं समादियामि। सूरामेरय मच्च प्रमादठाना वेरमणि सिक्खापदं समादियामि। विधायकशील मैत्रीपूर्ण कर्म करके मैं अपने शरीर को शुद्ध करता हूँ। मुक्त हस्त से दान करके मैं अपने शरीर को शुद्ध करता हूँ। शांति, सादगी तथा संतुष्टि का पालन करके मैं अपने शरीर को शुद्ध करता हूँ। सत्यता पूर्ण व्यवहार से मैं अपने वाणी को शुद्ध करता हूँ। स्मृति सुस्पष्ट और प्रदीप्त रखकर मैं अपने मन को शुद्ध करता हूँ।
समीक्षा आप म्यूट हो।
थैंक यू प्रणय और पायल, आपके द्वारा ली गई पूजा से कार्यक्रम में विधायकपूर्ण वातावरण निर्माण हो गया है। इसके बाद हम यहाँ पर उपस्थित हमारे गेस्ट ब्रह्मचारी लोकमित्र जी और साथ ही हमारे गेस्ट लीडर ब्रह्मचारिणी श्रद्धा वज्री, ब्रह्मचारी सुचि रत्ना, यश रामटेके, सुमित चौहान, कुणाल रामटेके, विकास कुमार और साथ ही भारत के विविध जगह से हमारे साथ जुड़े सारे साथियों का स्वागत करने के लिए डिजिटल क्लैपिंग से एक बार सभी का स्वागत करते हैं। इसी के साथ मैं भाग्यश्री को अपने कविता के जरिए सभी का फिर से स्वागत करने के लिए आमंत्रित करती हूँ।
थैंक यू समीक्षा। सभी को मैत्रीपूर्ण जय भीम। On the glorious occasion, I welcome you with all my heart to this program of inauguration. Showers of freedom, equality, liberation were given to us. So all hearts are filled with joy and happiness. They were the diamonds who were blazed in the fire of discrimination, and so they become marvelous and flawless. They were burned but shined along all their life to make our future precious. One fought for the upliftment of women, other gifted us the Constitution. They spread happiness, though their life was full of afflictions. I bow down my head in front of them. I devote myself to their mission. I offer them a candle and a flower, and name of these revolutionaries, Kranti Surya Mahatma Jyotiba Phule and Bharat Ratna Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. I welcome you all to the program of Glory of Ideological Thoughts. Jai Bhim.
थैंक यू भाग्यश्री। आपने आपकी कविता के द्वारा सभी गेस्ट का काफी अच्छी तरीके से स्वागत किया है। अभी मैं अपने गेस्ट लीडर उनका परिचय देने के लिए लखिंदर जी को आमंत्रित करना चाहूंगी, पर उसके पहले मैं उनका परिचय देना चाहूंगी। लखिंदर जी यह झारखंड से है। लखिंदर जी NTI के एल्यूमिनी है और वो मानसिकी के लिए काम कर रहे हैं। लखिंदर जी ब्रह्मचारी लोकमित्र जी के पर्सनल असिस्टेंट भी है। तो मैं उनसे निवेदन करती हूँ कि वो हमारे लिए ब्रह्मचारी लोकमित्र जी का परिचय करें, हमें परिचय दें।
Thank you समीक्षा and NNBY टीम। मैं बहुत लंबे समय से जुड़ा हूँ और खासकर उत्तम जी के साथ आप लोगों से जिस तरह से परिचय हुआ है उसका भी मैं बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद करता हूँ। खासकर अगर लोकमित्र जी की बात करें तो मुझसे ज़्यादा आप अपने आप में क्या एक्सपीरियंस करते हैं, उनको जितनी बार आपने सुना है वो ही बहुत अपने आप में एक अनुभवी ऐसा हम बातें कह सकते हैं। और मैं आज ऐसा कुछ ज़्यादा बताने वाला नहीं हूँ उनके बारे में, क्योंकि हम जितना ज़्यादा उनको सुनेंगे वो हमारे लिए एक तरीके का परिचय भी हो जाएगा। हमको समझ में आएगा कि उनके जो विचार है, उनके जो मन हमारे लिए जो एक डायरेक्शन देने की जो बातें हैं वो कितना मायने रखती हैं हमारे लिए, और जिस तरह से वो हमारे लिए सोचते हैं एक तरीके से वही उनकी एक अलग व्यक्तिमत का एक एग्जाम्पल देती हैं। एक बहुत संक्षेप में अगर बताया जाए तो उनको 42 इयर्स हो गए हैं इंडिया में, और उन्होंने बहुत बड़े बड़े अलग अलग तरीके से काम किए हैं। जिस तरीके से हम देखते हैं कि टीवीएमएस जी का जिस तरीके से बड़ा एक गुट है, और वो भी एक आम सिंपल सा कोई गुट नहीं है, वो एक इतनी बड़ी संघ है जो एक्चुअली मॉरलिटी एथिक्स को मायने रखती है। तो उसका एक नींव देना, उसको एक स्ट्रक्चर देना, उसमें लोकमित्र सर का बहुत बड़ा हाथ है। जब मैं नागलोक में स्टार्टिंग में आया तो ज़्यादा बातें नहीं हो पाती थी उनके साथ में, क्योंकि मैं ट्रेनिंग में रहता था और उनका एक अलग ही व्यक्तिमत्व है। उस हिसाब से अगर देखें तो वो बहुत बिजी रहते हैं, बहुत ही ज्यादा बिजी रहते हैं। तो उनसे समय लेना भी एक अपने आप में चैलेंज है। तो जब मैं वहाँ पे था नागलोक में, तो मैं फिर प्रोमोटेड हुआ गेस्ट मास्टर करके, तो पता चला कि मुझे लोकमित्र सर को सर्व करना है, और ये 2015 की बात थी। तब मैं धीरे धीरे उनके करीब आने लगा, पता चलने लगा कि वो कैसे हैं, कितने उनका बिजी शेड्यूल के साथ साथ वो अपना खुद का पर्सनालिटी और वो किस तरीके से लोगों को शेप करना चाहते हैं, लोगों को चेंज लाना चाहते हैं, डेवलपमेंट की जो बातें करते हैं, और उसमें वो एक्शन में कैसे दिखता है, वो उनके दिनमर्रा के एंगेजमेंट से पता चलता है। तो वो बहुत ही नरम दिल, फ्लेक्सिबल, बहुत ही अच्छे हैं इस तरीके से कि आप जब भी उनको अपनी बातें शेयर करेंगे वो आपको हमेशा सुनेंगे, और वो इतनी गहराई से सुनते हैं कि आपको बता भी देंगे कि आप सही में आप कैसे हो और आपको क्या क्या बदलाव लाना चाहिए। तो ये बहुत अच्छी लगती है मुझे सर के बारे में। वो बहुत स्ट्रिक्ट हैं। अगर आप अपने कामों को रेस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी तरीके से नहीं करते हो तो उन सब मामलों में बहुत स्ट्रिक्ट हैं, लेकिन आप अगर बहुत हार्ड वर्किंग हैं तो बहुत अप्रिशिएट करते हो वो, बहुत ही ज़्यादा। ये हर लीडर में एक बहुत खास बात होती है, और वो एक ये क्षमता है उनमें, लेकिन वो अपने आप को कभी ऐसे लीडर मानते नहीं है। वो सबके साथ मिल के चलने की जो प्रैक्टिस है वो उनमें है। तो वो अपने आप को ऊपर नीचे नहीं समझते। अलग बात है कि हम उनको उस कैटेगरी में रख देते हैं कि वो हमसे बहुत ही ज्यादा श्रेष्ठ है, लेकिन वो हम सबके साथ मिलकर काम करने में बहुत ज्यादा इच्छुक रखते हैं। खासकर अभी जो हमारे यूथ्स है, आप देखे होंगे कि खासकर अभी ये भी एक्सपीरियंस रहा कि जब मैंने उनको एक मेल लिखा कि सर NNBY आपको बुलाना चाहते हैं इनॉग्रेशन सेशन के लिए, तो उन्होंने ज्यादा नहीं 1 घंटे के अंदर में उन्होंने एक्सेप्ट किया और बोला कि बताओ क्या करना है, कैसे करना है। तो वो बहुत इच्छुक हैं अभी के यूथ के साथ काम करने के लिए, और सही में वो चाहते हैं कि वो उनके जो एक्सपीरियंसेस रहे हैं पिछले 40 साल में इंडिया को लेकर के, तो वो बताए कि डेवलपमेंट कैसे देखते हैं वो, और वो जानना चाहते हैं यूथ से कि उनकी क्या क्या दिक्कतें हैं, क्या उनको सीखना चाहिए, वो अपनी कैपेसिटीज और कैपेबिलिटीज को कैसे बढ़ाना चाहिए। एक तरीके से वो होप रखते हैं कि आज के जो यूथ है वो आगे चल के इंडिया को शेप दे। वो इसलिए कि वो ये भी देखते हैं हम यूथ में बहुत एनर्जी है, हम स्ट्रेंथ रखते हैं, हम बहुत ही काइंड स्टेबिलिटी रखते हैं कि हम कुछ सोचे अपने आप में और एक डायरेक्शन दे अपने आप को। तो मैं ज़्यादा वेट ना करते हुए मैं खुद एंकर को बोलता हूँ कि अगर वो डायरेक्टली हम लोकमित्र जी को बुलाए और हम डायरेक्टली उनसे सुने तो वो सबसे बेस्ट रहेगा। थैंक यू।
थैंक यू लखिंदर जी, आपने बहुत ही अच्छे तरीके से हमें ब्रह्मचारी लोकमित्र जी का परिचय दिया। अभी ज्यादा समय न गवाते हुए मैं ब्रह्मचारी लोकमित्र जी से निवेदन करती हूँ कि वो अपने इनॉग्रल टॉक को शुरुआत करें।
So, Jai Bhim, Namo Buddhaya, and very, very nice to see you all. Thank you very, very much for inviting me. I'm always happy to engage with NNBY. I think it's got a wonderful spirit. And, you know, I think just the fact that it transcends caste, it transcends region is so, so important. I've noticed that with our Nagaloka alumni. when you have a number of people from different backgrounds, whatever their social background, regional background, you get a very special energy. And that itself is a very important aspect of liberation. You experience yourself in a different way than you do before. We may not notice this, but this is what is happening. And this is why one of my favorite occasions has always been our alumni retreats, when we have so many people, and also more recently, some NNBY gatherings. So I'm very happy to be with you when you're celebrating Mahatma Jyotiba Phule and Baba Saheb Ambedkar's anniversaries. You know, it's such an important day. And it's very interesting that you've chosen this theme. I don't know whether I pronounce it right, but Arko Iris, is that right? How
Yes,
do I
sir.
pronounce it?
Arko Iris, right, sir?
Okay, thank you. So I was a bit confused at first because I didn't know what it meant. I'm not young anymore, so I'm not up to date with things. But it's a wonderful theme, liberating freedom. Or the free, liberated, liberating energy, or the energy that comes from freedom, and so on. So it's very inspiring and, yeah, very appropriate for the celebration of these two great people, and also for young people in the world in India today. And when I was thinking of this, I remembered a vision that I had in 1967 or 1968. That shows you how old I am. I was 19 or 20 at the time. And I had this remarkable and very powerful vision. And it was of a rainbow, but not a rainbow out there, but a rainbow that encompassed everyone I was with, all my thinking, all our thinking, everything around me. It was as if the rainbow went through me and through everyone around. A very, very strange experience. And I can remember it very, very vividly today. It was, I had a couple of visions around that age, which that was before I was a Buddhist. I knew nothing about Buddhism. I knew nothing about the spiritual life then, unfortunately. But I had this vision that everyone there, all our thinking, all of what we were doing just merged into everything else. And it was as if all the colors of the rainbow, which they do, they merge into each other. At the same time, each color is distinct and beautiful and individual. So this to me was the sort of meaning of the rainbow, that everything is connected. Everything merges into anything else. Nothing is fixed. Anything can change. There's no limitations. And yet each part of that rainbow has its own distinct beauty. So it's a symbol of possibilities. It's a symbol of freedom from any fixed identity. So I think it's very appropriate. And Jyotiba Phule and Baba Saheb have opened the doors to this experience of freedom for all of you and so many, many millions of people, but especially young people. Now, at that time in London, because I lived in London then, but that time in the UK and the West generally, America especially, Europe, I think India was very different, China was very different, Russia was very different. That time, there was a sort of explosion of discovering freedom in so many ways. There was an explosion of questioning. Young people then realized, we do not have to go along as we've been going along for so many, as we thought we had to go along. There were explosions in politics, student revolutions all over Europe, America. There was the civil rights movement. There was the beginning of the Black Power movement. There was the demonstrations against the Vietnamese War. You haven't really seen anything like this in history before. There was the end of psychological limitations. There was this sense of psychological freedom. You didn't have to go along with conventions. There was religious freedom. You didn't have to go along with the main religion, Christianity. You could think outside of that. You could question it even. You could criticize it even. In fact, Sangharakshita wrote at that time a very important booklet called Buddhism and Blasphemy, and you should read it if you can. It's a critique of Buddhist views on, well, I won't say now, but something called blasphemy, Buddhism and blasphemy. So there was a questioning of, there was an openness to sexual orientation. So before then, homosexuality was outlawed. Now there became an openness, an acceptance of homosexuality. It was the beginning of the feminist movement in the real sense. You know, it started it started before. You go back to the 30s, you go back 100 years, 200 years, you see the seeds of it there. But it was in the 60s, the second half of the 60s, that it really, really got going. So everything was changing very fast. Economically, there was a sense of well-being, cultural change, so much. So when I recall my vision of the rainbow, all this this period in Western history and in my own personal life comes to mind. We discovered at that time the possibilities of life. We found that we didn't have to go along just because tradition said we should do this, just because our elders said we should do this, just because of that's what society did. We could question things. So it was a sense of, there was a tremendous sense of freedom and liberation at that time, new energy. So in a sense, there's a parallel happening with young people inspired by Babasaheb Ambedkar in India today. Yeah? If you think of your grandparents, if they're alive, or even if you knew them before they died, or great-grandparents, they could not think like you are thinking today. Yeah? Their lives were very, very different. You can think in very, very different ways than they did. You've got all sorts of possibilities, economic possibilities. Ask your grandparents what sort of clothes they had 50, 60 years ago when they were your age. Yeah? Ask them what sort of clothes. I'll tell you a story. My wife, you know, my wife is Indian and from Maharashtra. I hope she won't mind me saying this. But after we got married, she always wore a sari. And then one day we were meeting outside Pune somewhere because I had to, at Kondanpur, our little center there, I had to go in advance. And she came later. This must have been a year or two after marriage. And she came not wearing a sari, but a salwar kameez. And this was the first time she'd done this. And she was very embarrassed. And I didn't care a damn. It didn't matter at all to me, but she was breaking tradition. Yeah? But you don't think nothing like that occurs to you today. Yeah? So if you think back, but for her mother would never wear anything but a sari. Yeah? And so if you think back to your parents, to your grandparents, even to your great-grandparents, you can see the incredible change, the incredible sense of freedom that there is now that there wasn't then. Yeah? And that's freedom education. Most of you have got a good education. You know, how many of your parents, grandparents had that education, had that possibility? Some of you very highly educated. You've got access to finance, to jobs. Think of what your parents and grandparents did. Nothing like that. You've got a sense of dignity. You don't have to think in the old caste terms. You know, when I traveled around Maharashtra in the 1980s, and some people would say to me, look, you know, we're untouchable. I was shocked by that. You don't even think like that now. It doesn't come into your mind. You know, you're free of that. Of course, you know, there's the external things, but it's not part of your own identity anymore, like it was before. So there's that. You've got a sense of dignity that wasn't possible before. So there are so many changes that have taken place in your lives, and especially because of Jyotiba Phule, but most especially because of the life of Baba Saheb. But the big question is, how do we maintain this sense of freedom has come about as a result of various conditions. This sense of freedom, and we must be careful here not to be fooled, this sense of freedom has not come about because of us. Yeah. You know, the educational possibilities, the social possibilities, obviously we make use of them, but we haven't created that situation. We are enjoying the freedom that they have given us, but we have not created that. So how do we go on to make sure that we maintain this freedom? Now, for me, when I had that vision of the rainbow, and afterwards, I realized for the first time in my life, or second time in my life, the capacity of the mind. You know, I realized that I was in a pretty terrible state when I was young, much worse than any of the people I know here. I had no idea that I could change my mind, no idea that the world could change. And this vision of the rainbow and other experiences gave me the understanding that I wasn't fixed, I wasn't limited, I could change my mind. The question was how to take that further. Yeah? How to take that further, how to internalize that process, not just because of conditions outside that we felt free. Yeah, how to internalize that and take that sense of freedom forward. And that quest eventually led me in 1970 to Buddhism. It took a long time. And but in a sense, becoming a Buddhist wasn't enough. It was when I became a member of the Trilokya Baudhamma Sangha in January 1974. That's when I went for refuge and I became a Dhammachari. And I was given the name Lokamitra. But it wasn't until 2.5 years later that I realized the essence of the Dhamma. And that was when Sangharakshita gave a series of lectures called the Transformation of Self and World in the Sutra of Golden Light. And there he showed, and if you've heard me before, you've heard me say this, there he showed very, very clearly that you cannot work on your own mind without working on the world. You cannot work on the world without working on your own mind. Now, I'm not going to explain this now. You can discuss it another time. But this is the teaching that I think I've been looking for all my life. Yeah? This teaching made real sense to me. You know, I realized that personal liberation by itself was just not an option. It couldn't work. Personal liberation and liberation of the world had to go together. Yeah? It's not that, in a sense, you know, everyone has to change like you're changing, but they're not separate processes. And Baba Saheb made this extremely clear. Yeah? And, you know, as I probably said to you before, it was when I came to Diksha Bhumi in 1977 that I realized here was the possibility of that vision. Here was the possibility of transformation of mind and transformation of self and transformation of world. You know, not the whole world, but a good portion of the world. And in a sense, you are proof of that. Yeah? You've come out of that incredible action of Baba Saheb's of converting to Buddhism. You know, the fact that you're a community, NNBY, the fact that we have alumni community, the fact that you have Buddhist communities everywhere, the fact that you support each other, the fact that you've got the opportunities you've got, shows that it's not, the conversion was not just for transformation of self, little individuals tucked away by themselves, not communicating with each other, but was going to have an impact on society. So I think that this is something you have to bear in mind. The freedom that you experience now is something, in a sense, that you've been born into, you've been given. Yeah? How to go forward? That's the big question. How to go forward? You know, we can, there's a danger that we get intoxicated with our freedom. Yeah? This is you know, the Buddha talked of the intoxicants. Yeah? And one of the intoxicants is of youth. Yeah? We don't see things clearly because we're young, or we're healthy, or we're beautiful, or we've got position, or we've got money, whatever it is. We don't see things clearly. And if we don't see things clearly, one day there's a danger that we will fall. Yeah? At the moment, it's a very inspiring time for Buddhists and followers of Baba Saheb. Even though we know the external situation in India is, you know, there are other things going on. We don't know what's going to happen in 20, 30 years' time. I've just been reading a report by the American intelligence services about the world in 2040. And I probably won't be alive then, but it's not a very nice picture. I mean, it shows 5 different possibilities. If you're interested, I'll send a copy to Uttam and he can send to those of you who are interested. It's very interesting. But it looks at democracies, it looks at geopolitics, America, China, Russia, India. It looks at climate change. It looks at all these factors and gives different possible scenarios. And most of them are not very nice. I don't want to depress you, but I just want to say that we cannot rely on the future being as it is today. After the war, I grew up. I was born 2 years after the World War in 1947. And as I say, in the 60s, when I was 19, 20, it was an incredibly optimistic age. Yeah? We were idealists. We thought we could do anything. We thought we could change ourselves, change the world, everything. This continued into the 70s. This continued as we became Buddhists. You know, Subhuti, you all know, Subhuti and I lived together. We dreamt together. We had this common vision. We were close to Sangrakshita. We shared his vision. We wanted to change the world. We were optimistic that we could make a difference. And, you know, in some ways, I think we have made a difference. But the world is a very different place than it was 50, 60 years ago. We thought the Cold War would end. It did end. But now it seems to be coming back again. We thought that it would become the age of democracies. But now democracy is under threat. Yeah? So everywhere, the idealism that we had in our 60s is being threatened in the 1960s. So I don't want to be pessimistic, but I do want you to be realistic. Enjoy life now, but just be aware that the world is not necessarily going to go on as it is now. Actually, I think that the Indian Ambedkarite situation is the most optimistic social movement in the world today. Yeah? And I think that it will go on making an enormous contribution to India. Yeah? I know some people are pessimistic about India. I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic largely because it's a democracy, the democracy sort of, in a sense, framed by Baba Saheb, and also equally because of his incredibly determined movement to stand for democracy and not to give an inch. Okay? So I think that the world is going to look to Dr. Ambedkar and his movement increasingly over the next 10, 20, 30 years. You've seen what's happening in America. You've seen, I shouldn't get into politics, but, and I don't need to say anything because I'm sure you're all aware of Black Lives Matter, the last 4 years, the previous president and so on. That could come back. Yeah? That could come back. I believe India has a stronger democracy than in America in some ways. And it's got a stronger social movement. So how do we make sure that this wonderful experience of freedom that we have today is continued? Well, it was this, I believe, that led Baba Saheb to Buddhism. Yeah? He believed, you know, you've all heard it, reformation of mind, reformation of the mind of man, reformation of the mind of the world. His greatest message to continue the path of liberation was Buddhism. Oh, I've lost you 1 minute. Sorry. You know, I think that he has a very special approach to Buddhism that you won't find in most of the world emphasized. Sangrakshita and he have this approach in common, but others don't explicitly make it. Transformation of self, transformation of world, they have to go together. Yeah? You cannot liberate yourself. You cannot maintain your own freedom without working on the world. You cannot cut yourself off from society. You can't just live in your own little group and experience freedom. You have to be equally helping the world to become free. And so this was Baba Saheb's, in a sense, greatest message. And he was very strong, as I've said so many times, but we can say it again and again and again. Today, increasingly, people are calling, or tomorrow, Baba Saheb Jayanti, the day of equality. Yeah, I believe in I think it's Vancouver in Canada. they've declared tomorrow the whole city. Yeah? And most of the city members are not, most of the members of the city population are not Ambedkarites, but they've declared it the day of equality after Baba Saheb. Yeah. And so Baba Saheb says in the Buddha and his Dhamma, yeah, he talks about practicing the Dhamma to become a better human being, a greater human being, a wise human being, an ethical human being, a human being full of metta and karuna. But then he says, I'm saying it in my own words, he said, all this is useless unless you strive to create equality. Creating equality, promoting equality is the test of your Dhamma practice. So if you're not doing that, he's saying you're not actually practicing the Dhamma. And if you're not practicing the Dhamma properly, where is the possibility of liberation? Where's the possibility of freedom? Where's the possibility of this wonderful new energy? And he said this in another way, and I'll conclude with this because my 20 minutes are up. He said this in another way in one of my favorite lectures of his, Ranade, Gandhi, and Jinnah. I don't know, you've probably read it, most of you, but it's a brilliant essay. And please read it if you haven't. And I come back to it time and time again. So he talks about what is a great man? What makes a man great or human being great? And he said there are three things. First of all, he says there's sincerity. And by this, he means ethical integrity. You know, one is honest, one is ethical, yeah? One is sincere. You know, that is the absolute foundation, if you like. But he said this is not enough, not nearly enough. Yeah? It's absolutely foundational, but it can leave you at the foundations of life. It may not take you very far. It's not enough, in other words, he said, to be a good person. Yeah? It's absolutely crucial, but not enough. So then he says, the second thing is to be, well, he says, intellectuality and energy. He combines them. It's intellectuality that gives energy, that inspires, that makes you really think. Now, many of us may think, look, I'm not an intellectual. Yeah? But that's not what he means. We can all study, we can all think, we can try and think. We can read Baba Saheb's writings, we can read the Buddha's writings, and we can think about things, we can discuss things, we can try and understand what they mean. And as we try and work with ideas of others, this gives us new energy. And I'm sure many of you know that. Yeah? When we sort of get to grips with other people's ideas, we get new inspiration. Our own thoughts start to come out of that. And we become, in a sense, not just good people, but we become individuals. We begin to learn to think for ourselves. Now, don't get me wrong. Most people don't think for themselves. They just think according to their reaction, whether they like something or don't like something, or whether it comes out of their conditioning. You know, remember the Kalama Sutta of the Buddha? The Buddha said, don't just go by repeated hearing, what you've heard again and again and again from your parents, from your school, from your society, from your friends. Don't go by tradition. Don't go by what the texts say. Don't go by what this clever person or this monk says. Yeah? Try and work it out for yourself. Baba Saheb said the same thing in that beautiful, beautiful piece on freedom of mind. In which way freedom? Mukti kon pate. He is very strong there, and you've heard me quote this, so I won't go into it again. He said, freedom of body is nothing. In a sense, freedom from conditions that have been given to you, like all of us, is nothing. Freedom of mind, freedom to think for ourselves, is the real freedom. So this is what he means, I believe, by this intellect and energy. Yeah? It's the learning to think for ourselves, to decide responsibly for ourselves, not just on the basis of what our mother said to us when we were young, what our school teacher said, what our community says, what our friends group says, and so on. Yeah? Can we think deeply and stand out and say it to others? Yeah? So this is the second thing, but this, Baba Seb said, was not enough. He said the mark of a great person is more than that. The mark of a great person is to cleanse society. So again, he's saying in a sense what he said in the Buddha and his Dhamma, what is Sadhamma. You know, ethics, sincerity is not enough. It can give you a sense of freedom, freedom from regret. You feel good, yeah? You don't feel bad, you don't feel guilty or anything like that. Intellect and energy, thinking for yourself, great, you get a real sense of freedom, but it's not enough. He said, what makes us great is when we take all that energy and to do what we can to help society. So that's all I've got to say to you today, really. When we think of freedom, just be aware that much of our sense of freedom has come from the conditions we've been brought up in. Because of Baba said, because of our parents, our grandparents, because of government facilities. I'm not denouncing this at all, because the world is changing. We've got education, we've got money, we've got possibilities of jobs, we've got dignity. We can do different things. We don't have to stay in our village. We don't have to marry who our parents want us to marry. Yeah? But if we want to maintain and develop that sense of freedom, make it long lasting, then we have to work on ourselves. But that is not just a personal journey. It's not just my freedom. It's not I'm just going to work on my freedom. This is sometimes a mistake of Western Buddhists. Yeah, even some Indian Buddhists. They think, oh, I'm just working on myself. But we don't just work on ourselves. We can't just work on ourselves. That journey has to be taken with our engagement to the world. Yeah? So I hope that you'll bear this in mind. I hope that you enjoy, you develop your freedom as much as you possibly can, and that you appreciate and always appreciate the incredible contributions of Jyotirao Phule and especially Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar. Thank you. Jai Bhim, Namo Buddhaya.
Thank you very much, Dhamacharya ji, for such an inspirational talk. धन्यवाद लोकमित्र जी, अपने आपके इनॉग्रेशन टॉक के जरिए हम सबको प्रेरित करते हुए इस डायग्राम का आगाज किया। अभी मैं काजल से निवेदन करती हूँ कि वो इस इनॉग्रल टॉक पर अपने विचार व्यक्त करें।
So thank you so much once again, Lokamitra, Dhamacharya Lokamitra, for your such a beautiful talk. तो जैसे कि आप सभी को पता है कि आज से महात्मा फुले और डॉक्टर बाबा साहेब अम्बेडकर, इनकी जयंती हम NNBY के प्लेटफॉर्म पर सेलिब्रेशन कर रहे हैं। और आज का जैसे इंट्रोडक्टरी टॉक था लिबरेशन ऑफ माइंड, तो मुझे लगता है कि काफ़ी हद तक हम लिबरेटेड माइंड इसके बारे में जान चुके हैं लोकमित्र के धम्मचारी लोकमित्र टॉक के ब्रह्मचारी लोकमित्र टॉक से सॉरी टॉक दिए उस पे। तो उन्होंने अपने टॉक से हमें रेनबो इस कंसेप्ट के बारे में बताने का प्रयास किया। और उसमें उन्होंने बताया कि उसमें उन्होंने बताया कि हमने कैसे फ्रीडम ऑफ माइंड और हम कितना लिमिटेड रहते हैं, हम कितना फिक्स रहते हैं अपने थॉट्स के प्रति, तो उसको हमने कैसा ओपन करना चाहिए। साथ में साथ उन्होंने अपने टॉक में बताया कि हम ट्रेडिशंस में कितने जकड़े हुए हैं। और उन्होंने एक बहुत अच्छी बात की जहाँ मुझे वो बहुत अच्छी लगी और अपील करने वाली लगी कि उन्होंने बताया हम काम नहीं कर सकते जब तक हमारे माइंड हम जब तक काम नहीं कर सकते जब तक हम काम नहीं कर सकते हमारे माइंड के साथ विदाउट वर्ड के साथ। तो मुक्त मन का उन्होंने स्वतंत्र मुक्त मन ये कैसे होता है इसके बारे में उन्होंने बताया। तो थैंक यू सो मच। और जैसे कि आज से हमारा NNBY का प्रोग्राम चालू हो रहा है, तो ये 14 और 15 तारीख तक भी रहेगा। तो मैं सभी से अपील करती हूँ कि वो ऐसे ही हमारे साथ जुड़े रहे। तो यहीं पे मैं रुकती हूँ। थैंक यू सो मच।
समीक्षा आप म्यूट हो।
थैंक यू काजल। अब मैं अनघा से निवेदन करती हूँ कि वो अपने गीत के साथ इस कार्यक्रम का वातावरण संगीतमय करें।
थैंक यू समीक्षा। सभी को मैत्रीपूर्ण जय हिंद। आज हमारा डॉक्टर बाबा साहेब आम्बेडकर और महात्मा फुले जयंती के अवसर पे NNBY ने ये जो प्रोग्राम आयोजित किया है उसके इनॉग्रल इवेंट की अंतिम चरण में मुझे जो आपने गाना गाने का मौका दिया है उसके लिए मैं सभी को धन्यवाद देना चाहूंगी। माझ्या पदी भीमा वाहिलीस फुले, माझ्या पदी भीमा वाहिलीस फुले, धन्य धन्य झालो बदले महात्मा फुले, धन्य धन्य झालो बदले महात्मा फुले, माझ्या पावलांच्या पावला शोधल्यास भीमा तू पुन्हा पुन्हा, माझ्या पावलांच्या पावला शोधल्यास भीमा तू पुन्हा पुन्हा, वंदनीय झाली तुझी पावले, वंदनीय झाली तुझी पावले, धन्य धन्य झालो बदले महात्मा फुले, धन्य धन्य झालो बदले महात्मा फुले, प्रवास तुझा प्रवाहा विरुद्ध परिवर्तनाचे केले तू युद्ध, प्रवास तुझा प्रवाहा विरुद्ध परिवर्तनाचे केले तू युद्ध, शब्द तुझे ते टोकदार झाले, शब्द तुझे ते टोकदार झाले, धन्य धन्य झालो बदले महात्मा फुले, धन्य धन्य झालो बदले महात्मा फुले, माझ्या पदी भीमा वाहिलीस फुले, माझ्या पदी भीमा वाहिलीस फुले, धन्य धन्य झालो बदले महात्मा फुले, धन्य धन्य झालो बदले महात्मा फुले। धन्यवाद।
थैंक यू अनघा। अभी हम अपने इनॉग्रेशन प्रोग्राम के अंतिम पड़ाव पर दाखिल हो चुके हैं। तो मैं सबसे पहले अपने धर्मचारी लोकमित्र जी का धन्यवाद करती हूँ। उन्होंने अपना कीमती समय निकालकर अपने कार्यक्रम में उपस्थित रह के हम सबको प्रेरित किया है। इसी के साथ मैं अपने सभी स्पेशल गेस्ट का भी धन्यवाद करना चाहती हूँ, जिन्होंने यहाँ पर उपस्थित रह के अपने प्रोग्राम की शोभा बढ़ाई है और आगे वो हमें अपने अपने कार्यक्रम में मार्गदर्शन करने वाले हैं। और साथ ही मैं रसिका को भी धन्यवाद करना चाहती हूँ। उसने बहुत ही सुंदर रंगोली बना के सबका वेलकम किया है। और फिर से एक बार मैं आप सभी का धन्यवाद करना चाहती हूँ। भले ही आज का ये इनॉग्रेशन प्रोग्राम यहीं पे खत्म हो चुका है, पर आने वाले 2 दिन में हम सब फेसबुक और यूट्यूब के जरिए जुड़े रहेंगे। थैंक यू।